Hey Flock, Mike here from Epic Duck Studios. Welcome to the assembly guide for Anakin Skywalker from the Star Wars Shatterpoint core set. Now for all the models in the core set, but especially the terrain, I do recommend you pull up the assembly documents on your phone, tablet, or computer and follow along there. That said, there's a few places where assembly could be made just a tiny bit easier, and I'm going to try to point those out for you. So the core set comes with 2 sprues full of characters, and each sprue is broken up into segments that are individually lettered. So in this case, we're looking for segment A for Anakin. I don't think that was intentional, it just worked out that way. Now when I opened the bag full of the character sprues, there were 1 or 2 small pieces that had broken off the sprue and were loose in the bag. If you're missing a piece at any point, do be sure you check there, and do check the bags before you throw them out. The plastic cement I'll be using today is Mr. Hobby Mr. Cement S. It's basically the same thing as Tamiya Extra Thin, except that I can get it locally. I don't have a local store that carries Tamiya. They do carry Mr. Hobby. Here we are. To begin the assembly process, I'm going to take a very important sip of coffee and then grab my clippers. The clippers I'm using are the God Hand PN125s. That's the cheaper variety of God Hands. They run about 25 to 30 bucks Canadian, and they're honestly worth every penny. Well, I guess they're worth every nickel. We don't have pennies in Canada. Now for every part here except the lightsaber, you can just get your flesh cutters in as close as possible and clip it right off. You're pretty much good to go. If you feel like your clippers might damage the model though for any reason, turn them around, clip the sprue off of the frame, and then trim it later. The lightsabers in the core set are very thin, so be extra careful when you're clipping them. If they feel like they're giving at all, make sure you clip wide. Maul's lightsaber is probably the worst of them because it's attached at multiple points along the blade. Anakin's is actually pretty easy. Once you've got Anakin's 7 pieces clipped from the frame, put your frame aside and start cleaning up where the sprues attach to the parts and any little mold flash you might see. So you can see the majority of the tools I use here for cleaning models. It's just a fresh bladed X-Acto knife, size 11 blade, pretty standard, and a set of small hobby files. The X-Acto knife can be used to both cut away little bits of sprue that might be still left on the model and to lightly shave away mold lines. When a mold line runs right along the edge of a piece, sometimes it's easier to file it off than it is to shave it, and that's what the files are for. But sometimes the file backfires and you get a little bit of a fuzzy edge, and then you gotta go back in with the knife and shave it. In the entire kit, I found that the mold lines running along the front of Anakin's legs were some of the most obvious, and honestly, they're pretty minimal mold lines. If you're trying to do a nice quick tabletop paint job, you probably don't even need to worry about cleaning them up. Now there is a mold line running the length of the lightsaber blade. I'm using the side of my X-Acto knife and very lightly scraping to take it down. When it comes to the little bump there where the frame, where the sprue attached to the blade, I'm going to use a file instead and very lightly wear that down. I don't want to use the X-Acto knife to cut that little bump off because that runs the risk of the X-Acto knife kind of biting into the plastic a little bit and damaging the lightsaber blade. I want to keep that blade as nice and crisp as I can. There's a little mold line running along each side of Anakin's head, starting roughly at the ear and curving up over the top of his head. Now I had to leave a little bit of sprue attached to Anakin's left wrist because the sprue sort of attached in a little bit of a recessed area. I couldn't flush cut it. So I just left that tiny little bump there, and I'm cutting and scraping it down until it's nice and flat, and then just taking out the mold line around it. At this point, every piece has been prepped and it's time to start assembly. I'm getting my Mr. Hobby cement out and just applying a decent amount to the inside surfaces where it's really clear contact gets made between the front and back of the torso. This cement has a very short working time. If you don't get the 2 pieces together within about 10 or 15 seconds, it's basically dried out. That's why you see me putting on about 2 or 3 coats here. By building up a little bit, it gives me just a little bit more working time to get the pieces together. And then just give them a really good squish, hold them for 10-15 seconds, lets all the cement set. You'll want to set the torso aside and then glue the left and right legs together. Same deal, be pretty liberal with the glue. Not so much that it runs around, but enough that you've got a little bit of working time. Push the 2 pieces together and just hold them for a few seconds. Now the third step in Anakin's assembly instructions show the arms, the head, the torso, and the legs just all magically flying together. Don't do that. Glue the legs to the torso first, let that set, and then work from there. Now with some characters, it makes more sense to glue their head on before their arms. With Anakin, it doesn't really matter, nothing really gets in each other's way. So just put the next 3 pieces on in whichever order you like. I would recommend saving the lightsaber for last, even though I didn't do that myself. I needed to push on the bottom of Anakin's arm just a little bit, and it's too small an area for me to get a fingertip in there, so I'm using the tip of an X-Acto knife. When you're attaching Anakin's lightsaber arm, be very careful that you don't push on the lightsaber blade. It is really flimsy, you don't want to damage that. After I got this arm attached, I noticed a little bit of a mold line running along the outside of the wrist. I decided to file that down and then use an X-Acto knife to just shave away the little bit of a burr that the filing leaves behind. With Anakin's head, I didn't want to put the cement directly onto the head because it's really small and I've got it pinched between 2 fingertips. And there's the risk that the cement will just run up into my fingerprints and then that just messes up part of the model. So I applied it to the torso side instead and then just squished the head into place. One thing that's been nice about the Shatterpoint bases is every single one seems suitable for every single character. They have a much flatter profile than a lot of the Crisis Protocol bases do, so you can basically pick whatever you like for any given character. Now, unlike Crisis Protocol bases that have 1 sprue attachment point, Shatterpoint bases have 4, so there's a little bit more cleanup work to do. Once the base has been cleaned up and prepped, all you need to do is get a little bit of plastic cement on Anakin's feet, decide where he's going on the base, and hold him there for a little while. Finally, give all the cement on the model a little bit of time to dry, and you're ready to prime and paint your miniature. In a future video, I'll show you how I took Anakin from this to this. There'll be even more Shatterpoint assembly guides and painting tutorials coming to the channel soon. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, do something epic.